Um, so hello, everybody, and welcome to the second reading in this new series of the Cambridge Literary Review. I'm Lydia Wilson, one of the editors. We have the other three editors here, Paige, Rosie, and Joss. So yes, the idea of this series was to invite a CLR writer to then nominate two further CLR writers. No, sorry, two further writers in order to kind of spread our net, really, of expanding the readers and writers we know about. But this time what happened was that our nominated reader, Peter Gizzi, chose a couple that we know very well already, which is wonderful. And it means that we have a very great kind of CLR showcasing, I suppose. And on that note, I'd like to introduce the first reader, who's going to be Luke Roberts. And the wonderful thing about this is that Luke is in the very first Cambridge Literary Review ever, which astonishingly enough is 12 years old. And looking through it, it's so wonderful to see the lineup we had then. It's astonishing. Luke and I were both PhD students at the time. So it's kind of a moment of history almost. So I do recommend getting this one, but Luke has been in it many times since. And also, as we just mentioned, he will be in the next one that's going to be released any moment with a wonderful essay on Sean Bonney. So without further ado, over to you, Luke. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lydia, and it's so nice to be here. I haven't given a poetry reading since October 2019, so I might be, a little rusty. Kind of forgot how to do it. Yeah, and I've just been in my house since then, basically. So this is my one and only Zoom reading. This is cool. I'm going to read two poems, both longish poems. And one of them I wrote kind of at the beginning of all of this, when everything was up in the air. And the other one I wrote when things had sort of, come crashing down a little bit, or continued to kind of crush. This poem is called Ventolin. What they like is direct sunlight, song like glue, and how much things cost if you want them to stay still and understand defeat this time less euphoric, the disaster too diffuse to just step into, racing to wake up before the market, admire the morning air and wolf it down, watch them coughing up, holding history by the hand with one hand, acute and unacknowledged, and with the other hand touching my face. Did you hear the one about the epidemic, or the one about the epidemic and the state? I heard the one about the epidemic, a kind of ache, the same as always, lost to the weather and vague, to still want it like this, the parts of the language you do mouth to, most of you, and all the time, sticky on lookout for the gist. It never gets old. The prisoners in Medina and Brixton, the prisoners at Rikers, the debris, the missing, and the message, what the messengers leave, this time, this year, this time, this month, this time, this week, catching the difference, you tell it to a friend, complete and unretrievable, you patent the question and give it away. It gets old. Cut bleeding on the knuckle, stuck piling up rewrites. What you find on the floor just falls in to your lap like the head of a lover floating downstream. You spring the day back faultless, break off the brocade and taste of salt and aloe vera, taste of salt and aloe vera, taste of salt and aloe vera and alcohol. Lyric poetry and sobriety. It's okay. I wouldn't always recommend it, but it's okay. It took years, it took forever, it took all day, And now it's done, keeping vigil at the end of the weird 2010s. Spent a decade off my legs and necking aspirin while the sun played aspirin to the sky, said someone you don't know in some other blunt decade, also thinking of defeat. And have I been here before? Did we meet somewhere once? Did I say something terrible and brilliant? The glory in shame, the memory of sweat, and who is it deja vu will belong to? The thing is, you get older, your friends die, you lose your sense of humor, you move away, and they also come back, weathered surface, rocky outcrop, tie a ribbon to the one you want to cut down, tie a ribbon to the one you want to leave. We were outside the British Museum, as unhappy as it's possible to be. We were drinking lime and soda, changing places in the world. What we wanted was the total break, but not like that, and not like this. Hard to give a fuck about Etruscans. Day color of pigeons, more gloomy than bluish. Keeping vigils, what I said, to the damage, and fuck of Virgil, and all the filled in wish fulfillment of camaraderie, and camaraderie's paranoid after party, who heard a rumor of voting, and a rumor of death, and a rumor of choosing. Every time you check the news, you lose a life, and who the life belongs to, on the island sinking into floorboards, more than what we asked for, less or less than nothing less than that, locked in song for chewed up evening, the mildest winter I remember, getting whiplash, had to learn it, had to sit through 1,000 odes to debt and business, 1,000 more to inattention, ill-advised attempts at imitation, fawning under ruthless supervision, tasked with brilliance in the fairest of the seasons and the season's fairest failures to transform. Spring, hand me my air horn, hand me the phone book, point to the beautiful world. You smell like sleep and nothing else, getting fainter all the time. What passes for midnight, moon clipped on the left, dark blue and familiar, windows open, where I live in retribution was the shadow for my friend all broken up before you split, slipped off, drew a line between the dying. I tried to tell you. And now the light is dirty. The light is dirty now. And now you turn a corner in your head and in the street, counting days lost to sickness, days lost to strikes, backwards from 10 and miss the target. Didn't take as long as I thought it would, but I don't know. I might read a tiny bit of this this book, Glacial Decoys, which Martin Corliss Smith published in Boise, in Idaho. Just a tiny bit. I don't really approve of reading prose, you know, and it's mainly prose. But I'm going to read this section that comes at the end, just quick, you know, from another time. And I wrote this at the beginning of the pandemic in a kind of like a craze. And this is cool. This is towards the end of this kind of episodic kind of tantrum. The last time the skies were this blue and quiet was in 2010, when the volcano erupted in Iceland and all flights were grounded for a week. I was in Iceland when it happened, having a weird time with a creative writing travel grant. I was writing a book of poems about conspiracy theories, either ahead of my time or exactly congruent. For reasons that remain partly obscure to me, I wanted to go to Iceland to see the grave of Bobby Fischer. Fischer had been granted asylum there after participating in a chess match in Yugoslavia in 1992, while Yugoslavia was under US sanctions. In my poem, Bobby Fischer represented a kind of shadow figure to Ezra Pound, but there's no way any reader could really guess this. Dutifully, I went to see the grave of Bobby Fischer, traveling 40 miles by bus to a tiny village, the churchyard entrance set within a farmyard. It was March and it was during the financial crisis. It was bleak. Over-enthusiastic, I stayed in Iceland for 2 weeks, speaking to almost no one. I took long walks, worked on my poem, read books about Bobby Fischer, alarmed myself with feelings of messianic insight, and had vague religious feelings while staring at the sea. Towards the end of my trip, I took a bus tour around southern Iceland. One of the stops was a folk museum on a farmstead. One thing that I forgot to mention in this is that one of the stops that we passed was the house of the man who invented Esperanto, which was it had a very powerful, aura. Towards the end of my trip, I took a bus tour around southern Iceland. One of the stops was a folk museum on a farmstead. Our group is greeted by a young man and an old man. The young man leads us on a tour of the museum, showing us precious relics, letters said literally to be from heaven to protect sailors at sea, ancient mouse traps, spinning reels, antique headboards decorated with lullabies. The old man comes over to me and asks me where I'm from, and I tell him Cumbria. He says, Cumberland, and walks away, returning with a postcard on which he's written, "To my friend from Cumbria," which he tucks into the pocket of my hooded sweater. He's maybe 80 years old. The tour ends and the old man tells us to go to the church, which we do, and he comes and plays and sings a hymn at the organ. I stare out of the window across the flat landscape to the sea. The sun is shining. It is a rare experience. As we walk out of the church, he walks me to what he tells me is the first wooden house built in southern Iceland, made from timber collected from a wrecked hospital ship. He shows me a series of photographs of young men lost at sea in the late 19th and early 20th century and puts his arm around me. Then he shows me a picture on the wall, an old black and white portrait of a man standing outside the building we're in. The man has a beard, and the old man tells me he was from England. I look at the photograph. The old man grabs my ass and tells me I can stay in Skogar for as long as I want. I start to wonder if I remind him of the man in the photo. He kisses me on the lips. It's time to go. I wave him goodbye and get on the bus. The bus drives out on through the landscape. We stop off at a glacier tongue, troop out and think about the color blue and the end of the world. The tour guide points out that all the houses around here are painted one of 4 colors. This is part of an evacuation system in case of volcanic eruption. If you hear the sound of the volcano, you're supposed to go and wake up all the other houses in your color block. At least that's how I understand it. The bus driver says that any day now there's going to be an eruption. He was right. Okay, enough prose. This is the last thing. This is called Mount Pleasant, and it's in some sections, and it shouldn't take too long. Part of me thinks, who cares? Who cares? Looking for the button, getting lost. If you can't pour it out like a human decanter, the least you can do is shut up. There's no escape hatch dickhead in the winter forgiveness, like a problematic woodcut or the lapidary style or any boyish optimist attending to his plants. Where's the style go? Who took it for granite? Who took it to quartz? The breeze was always limb of storm, but no one noticed, hooting about looting as the air changed hands and we were finally something complete. What the waste of my time was embraced. Could have stopped to steal red apples, but we didn't. Despair, adventure, the law of life. That nice purple flower is Nemesia. That lilting golden moped is a moped. That guy who hurt his feelings over email. I take it all. The halib orange, the cherries, the Ferrero Rocher. When you finish, you're more personal, more errant, more liable to error. You are conscious, you are teeming with success. A sentiment for getting sentimental, a woman on crutches in the park. By the end of the year, I will be fluent, discouraged, wrung dry of all intent, socketed into the universe and passionately quiescent. A lavender hexagonal like sawdust given meaning. Don't call me again. Don't look it up. That nice tree is a cypress, and I am still a devotee of sap. That nice sap is a devotee of theory. That big lung has a thing for sitting down. Switch places and look at it this way. Your workplace was always unsafe, even if it makes you feel ashamed to say so. The room around you atrophies, gigantic, ancient, and moving. The harbor car park, the heavy sleepers, and the face mask hurts my face. A deer in a wheat field leaping in the sun. Nothing any more encrypted, just the basics. Shit like England's Helicon and some secondhand Lee Poe. I've been staying very still. It's called living in a city, wearing balaclavas and running past the bookshops in the peak Julyist sun, oblivious to snow and love, to screams there's no such thing, and sung this through a phone to anyone who'd listen, and miss my friends specifically. Don't tell them so I can keep the feeling, keep from feeling. Some don't, some didn't, some none of them said, saying sorry to the spirit pushing 50, unrepentant of the age, of the podcast, and what passes for scandal astringent, for belated gothic fakers, for the pseudo YouTube Florizel, whose name couldn't conjure whatever punishment he wanted, unfurled the cramp, the streamers, who the story belongs to, tokens on a stump, made it harder to ignore. All the skills kept snapping off in the graveyard where they come to score and scatter in the corner where the trees are tender shelter. Would you write them a sestina like a settled bet on milk tops and other shit you fill the house with? The prison and the factory, the transmemberment of song, and who caters to the yellow ferns in elevated gutters, perfect cloud control to surface plastic, no giveaway, no playback, sudden, amenable, ransack. You can't go back, and always I, in disagreement, throw it out. Advice, whatever kept happens to be useless, abandoned, okay if you're school, okay if you're church, but I'm not church or school, okay. Slices of, corners of, don't think at all slapped the blanket. And it seemed suddenly that the flakes were flaking off, and I was part of it, a part in a knot, attentive and several, inclined, with my trips on display, my pointed hands, and a magnet for freely composing. Old song. You are the flavorless gum I want to chew in the field of plausible errors, snorting caffeine and alpine refreshments to echolocate with the others, the tabletop, the masquerade, the overweening powers, the lectures I was tired of and the mammoth task ahead, the pliers for touching plywood and the plumber's special wrench, and the woodsman with the woodsman's axe and the fishes in the fishing catch. I saw a sparrow kill a man and Nazi poets fuck off. I saw a piece of caramel and Nazi poets fuck off. I saw a speeding light in sternum fervor complicate the awkward rapture in the worst of recent measures to give the South Coast my regards. That means it's over. Yank a ring pull, spitting in the vineyard, spitting on the castle. When Dover sinks into the sea, I will be happy. I will be overjoyed, returning to the car park where we watched the marching soldiers, quoting Buchner, and salting our food with it, smearing the page with it, the camera, always going for the sweet spot, equal parts texture and light, and the plain, embarrassed standbys who fell on the hurdles and tore them apart. It was strawberries and cream and arnica gel and a first-class ticket to Plymouth. And now he points his slingshot at my head. And now he points his rifle at his dog. And now he hands his lawyers a demand. The bath time of heroes comes under his command. I was obliquely involved in the movement. I'm what you call a fellow traveler or a flake. All I wanted was preludes and fugues. And if you tried to sharpen your face On the face of a friend, you tend to deplete the achievement statuesque. Take this away from me and never give it back. The petulant spoil it like milk. The brilliant go off like cream. The meek get a seat at the table. The mawkish get sawed into two. In Carlisle, the autumn evaporates. The River Eden is a shitty river. But every name you get to keep, paying homage to the civic center where everything's outside. It's all outside. Those people don't get it. That people don't get it. I got stuck, unstuck, and then got stuck again. When it's nighttime in the province, I lose track of the nail file, the ambulance, the sweeping, the water. Years and years and years and years. And when will you ever explain it? You can have anything you want on the menu. You belong in the small drawer next to the blankets, a wild song barking in the night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you. And you do cover so many genres, and that's we've taken full advantage of that in the CLR. But I would say to everybody that the prose in the middle of that glacial decoys that came out this year is fantastic. I fully recommend getting hold of that. It's an unbelievable book. But also, yes, I think you're in CLR, what, 110, and coming up in the next one with a magnificent essay. So
thanks to you all for
well, thank you. Lovely reading. Next up is Hannah. Actually, Hannah's already also written in a variety of genres for us. Yes, the first one, and I don't have a copy of it, but I think Paige does, was in 8-9, which was the children's issue. And then again in issue 10, alongside both Luke and Peter, which is wonderful to have you all reading after being in the same issue. Hannah is joining us from Massachusetts today, and yes, I don't know how many genres she's reading in, but really looking forward to her to hearing what she's up to now. Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks so much, Lydia. And thank you, Luke, for that amazing reading. Thank you, Paige and Rosie and all the folks at CLR and everyone for coming. It's really an honor to read with Peter and with Luke. So I'm going to read a few poems from my book Earth that came out in 2019 from the Song Cave, which is a small press based in Brooklyn. Parable. One is flying, walking, one is being wheeled. One's sublet on this weedy earth, one's improving cornucopia, or an apple bong, abetting one's conversion. Whose name ended in gratitude or confusion, which effects led one to fiction, one to works. One is crying, one is howling, one is burned with the other. From the barrel of our chair, it was effort. Then it was forgotten. It was like a pearl of glue, one in one. However one approached time, time was touchy. There was weakness, shyness, wanting, dreams. One's truth won't work in dreams or in real life. It's confusing. The most mythic duet there is. Who was least? No one wondered. One is quieter and never ceases to be. This failure messes everyone up. A whole revolution arrived. Did it happen to this one born regardless, who lived alone, this one too, or whose objects of survival were one's cat, one's routines, a Dullsville book, some tea instead of beer, or vice versa? It tore this one who heard. It made this one a climate. One was little, one older, one who got no older, one cried. One becomes one, but not others. This failure happens again. A whole revolution, tons of merit, of use to minors, how ill this describes what it is like for us to alter. One hinted at a rule about the maimed, having thought rather than hurt one could make one understand, a person sailing through the ether, an image pleading, aging laptops beckoning part to whole. Why one is reasonable, why one unclear, or there's some shitty pattern in the pattern discrediting one's party as more powerful drugs ripped through man's place in the world, could no longer hide in that house of no more cover in the mental event, but the groin, the hair, the armpit, stack them together, leave them in the size of that. One's face is heavy, one has no audience. Both feet were broken. It was birth, then the choir. Earth. Nothing radical about that technology. Nobody touches this era. Could you find a home? Know my brother, who has a mind too, has a portion. And then I'm going to read some new stuff from over sort of the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. I also have a poem called Poverty Mountain, which Luke, you were talking about Mount Pleasant, I don't know, similar poet vibes, but Poverty Mountain, it's kind of in sections. I'm just going to read 2 sections of it. Poverty Mountain. Endure was her only name. She found it on the mountain. Our Lady of Fatima shining over there. And right here, the shitty restaurant, Portuguese, we go to anytime anybody dies. At the intersection of all data, flowers are keto to an energy healer on the phone, her small house in Detroit. To reprieve the fallen soldiers, the paperwork of poets upon some carpet in a lounge. One experience of representations is there, in there, or around, and the boring depths which mobilize what I do. Was it permissible? Who should be firm? Poverty Mountain. A reference qua the epics, an evening coming out of my wormhole into the hollow. What's good for the scurf pea? To be like the soul, crisply conspicuous. Art is nature. What's good for the codfish is good for the dog. What's right on the canvas bleeds into the myrtle. There are common bugs with no special status. I suppose they incite one to question the composition. Juveniles pose by the hole of a vicious god and feed on mums, ragweed, or horseradish. The chosen have fat diamond patterns in common, but some also lack this. They are cloudless, essayistic. Perched upon flowering legumes are false beetles, false underwings, and the familiar bluette. Caught in undulating effort at being itself, the damselfly flirts with that prehistorical something. Can idealism ever be accurate? When nature was dying, and when art died too, in the dewy petal of the corn plant and virtues, the heavy pollens, the bony fishes, the source of all edits. When no one knew the source of the edits, I blended right in with my poem, with its imitatio and its drama-rama, the cold, loamy lyrics exhorting this moment, its partiers, parasites, radicals, losers, the brave. I give them a leaf-blowing nod. Still life. The blueberries were wild. They were sharp and anonymous, strewn creatively upon a platter near the carcasses of duck. Destruction comes from seeds, that's common knowledge. When word welcomes me back to its random layers glued together just beyond the legend's math. All the glandular changes and many things under the aegis thing, petty trinities, colors of the poisonous sumac, many summary zones, all the general statements, shorelines and costumes, sandwiches, turrets. How long will we do this? The last poem I'm going to read is called Bowl of Fruit, and it's long and sort of in sections, and each section is about a page. Bowl of fruit. The bitter taste is important to our bodies. I'm only interested in true statements now. Everything coming into contact with the story is legitimate as well as bitter and goes from mouth to anus. Chicory, artichoke, citrus, red wine. Passing through this chain reaction, there are no false ideas, but we presume the elegy, present the elegy with flowers, asking where does it go, or looking at the spines of books. A woman with short hair holding a hand and crying, someone bleeding through a nose, crying. They were removing a tube, then everything after. I would be lost without ideas, so I wander to the breezeway mentally, in search of competent detail plus mystery, stale and definite, belonging somewhere. Wandering mentally is called mentation. Observe the rational animal. She is inside drinking or sitting in a chair. Bacardi so tired, even I drank it. One instinct urges, take her out of that future. I was too simple. At the back of the tongue, bitter activates bitter receptors, limited to a single act, traveling slightly diagonal through two lobes, getting smaller on the left in the order of representations. Lovely, liver, flushing. Organs joined in a long twisting tube, little persons with gowns on, riding an arrow, and other translocated things via the mucosal barrier, sunning on a fatty shore. A table littered with plastic container. Great happiness next to the injury. One slipped. By degrees, the gem might go floating away. An occasional habit will never describe her unconscious, as the patterns of English poetry are peculiar. They remember an imitation. What we are left with is the fact that the organism wishes to die only in its own fashion. Where did all that wisdom go? A yield of pleasure, pleasure for the living vesicle, pleasure for waking, waking the temples, waking the liver, and a line of blossoms in icy rain, passing the car with clergy propped up in its window. She carried and turned the many colors. She was running down. At odd moments, I return, communicate poorly the meaning of events. The colors she turned against your cheek, bending down to say goodbye, she vanished. Was she pleased? A woman trying to stand or shit, leaking terror and bitter from within 10,000 days that won't ever be described. Already manufactured by the liver, president of an insignificant corporation, going from mouth to anus, passing into the actual beyond like a final idea, not clearly unfair, or fate deciding this chain reaction in a season of breaking and the end of a world. One has the feeling I'm looking back on a bowl of fruit, like an image of utopia, meaning someone was among the maze, arranged for it. The bowl is blessedly distant. It's getting close. The orange softened, somewhat dropped and placed back in again into brownish hurt, a bitter greenish brown returning to some never determined main part. Could you argue with utopia's functional structure, that it gives research its vantage, that its dreams are so liquid, or nowhere's exactly perfection? All right then, I don't need you. I'll send you away. All right then, I don't need this. Do your dreams appear with an O? Are they imprisoned in a tree? To tell this kind of story of hormone, protein, and energy going after their freedom, it's very distinct. To see the corpse that is our body, to turn away, balefully private and severe as Vermont, regular people in Vermont calling on history or they're dead, slow on wintry mix, on purpose and not, filtering the bitter, bad, and good, to give it all away, this way by nose, by mouth, by skin and stress. Bodies aren't loyal, although very detail-oriented. They drain time, generate some kind of oozing, looking for detriment, then waiting for the activation, sliding without prestige. All crying can simultaneously take off and add to a face, some wrinkled, reddened, new, but used look, newly used by the tears. Poor face. The limit is thin, a moment of rage, and you lay down on the floor, everything coming into contact with you, its horizon unbalanced and fragile. In pursuit of nothing, she rolled her eyes, her yellow yes. The world came down, the bowl pressed up. What fruit was left? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was beautiful. It's really lovely to hear things out loud, and I'll go back to them, in fact. So thank you. Yes, and everybody, this is the issue that the three of them are all in together, with incredible cover from Susan Howe and loads of other awesome things inside it. So have a look and order and read. Yes, so now we get on to Peter Gizzi, who invited both Luke and Hannah, so in a sense curated this reading this afternoon, sorry, he's in New York. And we first came across him when he was the Judith E. Wilson Fellow of Poetry at the University of Cambridge, and that was the year that issue 5 came out. And so that was the first one he was in, and then has been in a variety since, certainly 8 and 9 alongside Hannah and many others, and 10. And is a CLR champion, and we're very grateful for all the support over the years, and lots of introductions, lots of readings, and lots of just poetical information sources and poetry. So without further ado, please, Peter, take it from here.
Thanks so much, Lydia. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Paige and Hannah and Luke. It's just such joy to hear you. So inspiring. I've been loving your work ever since I've begun reading it. And yeah, those are beautiful readings. This you've probably all heard before. I'm sorry. But I'm going to start with a couple of new poems, and okay, I'll just do that. I'll start again. Find spot unknown. Thus far we have spoken only the codes, a litany of survival. Thus spoke the silvered asphodel next to the factory ruin. Sound carries on water. My subject is the wind, to take umbrage at what a tree can do, watching one single birch become lightning, stunning the sky. Landscape is a made thing, to see the mind seeing itself, to see thought, a wing in night, the long brooding. Take it, listen, the night is orchestral when the power's on, everything disporting, a furred wand upon nothingness. I get it. It was good to leave the world, to find myself in thou. There's a lot to be said for seeing in the dark, and more to the light when there's nothing to see. If I write about the moon, it's because it's there. I am landlocked, surrounded by rivers and lakes, pills and leaves. I saw a better life. It was far off, sun on moss next to a friend, the softening air, the dandelion fluff. It was kinda real and kinda not. Can't see it today. And out of nothing, breath, a beast-like shadow in the glass. If I brought back every feeling I had, where would I put them? What could they mean to this world on the floor? It was best to let the moon unravel and focus the truth of the music. It was best to let the music unravel and focus the truth of night, like when I found you in the back of my mind. I am talking about people and the night, people inside the night and what we are made of, the things and the people, the signal and its noise. This next one is called Revisionary. Revisionary. I've decided to let my inner weather out. Even in the nerves flashing, some things are only shadow. What's up with that? My muse bruises me. Some days I sit hours to be relieved by a word. Today's word is invisible. I got it in a text, picturing myself in this landscape. I'm putting trouble into place, turning toward what is, listening to stone translate into silence. Here is an old rock covered with lichen in the mossy forest inside the self. I like it here when it's green. This is me evolving. We get to meet ourselves where we are. I'm hanging on a whisper. Certain prayers are tied to this ribbon. How in hell can nature throw clay into art, into a speaking being, into air? I saw a world that was an afternoon, this cloud in my hand, sky pouring into sky, reflecting the absolute of the lake, the flock in its tangle of shadow. Nearing the end, I could hear a lark, its trill fixing itself to my brain. It seemed a thing becoming a wave, a thing dissolving into the world as I found it, illegible, agrammatical, to parse the velocity of trusses and stars flowering here at the edge, calling me home. And the last of the new ones I'll read, Song. Song. Broken glass never told the earth. It's a blue world, a buzz of flies, somewhere music, giving itself to the eyes nothing, a reflecting surface designed for survival. Every glance some circumference of shadow calling into the psyche's paper blue hieratic light. Cardinals flaunt their red into a gentle rain. It stabilizes me in an ambient tape loop sort of way, soft and constant. When elsewhere becomes an image, a thing to live with, a worn feeling, an old force softening glass. Is there more sadness and beauty than beauty and sadness? The fluorescent afternoon sang. I have a couple of other new ones. I think I'm beginning to write a new book, which always feels like I'm writing my last book. Here's one from, I'm going to read two from the outer. This is reading from Sky Burial, a book I'm really happy with that Carcanet published, new and selected poems. This is a poem from the mid-2000s. Felt like reading it. Stung. A child, I became a question sitting on the grass, to be told how lucky I am, an open field. This corporeal expanse was a body too, in silver magnetism. If I became this light, it wasn't luck, it was easy. Bells falling away along the divide of night. Along the divide of night, an old face, a sorry dormer leaning in askew, below the incoming thunder. This was true, and even if ever I ran away, I ran away. Above everything, I held one true thing. This scene moved through me, a seesaw, a picture inside a question, inside the coming night. These trees rang round my head, shored up the sky. I went on and on like a trial balloon, over the houses, over the roofs, over my head. To remember correctly the color of pale grass in March, its salt hay, blonde flourish. To see it as it was, faded cloth, mute trumpet, the seam inside a day, the sun climbs. Simple the life of the mind standing outside in the grass in March, outside memory. Spring interrupts one cardinal monody, transmuted by a signal red, developing against a draining blue horizon. I want to go there and to have been there and to be there now, this walking right now by a river, simple and not so clear when transcribing this unstable, multiplying narrative spring. It can't be called anything. We too are sprung and wound with evolution. I want to say, that's it, love, not spring. I have felt it also in quilted drowning snow under the sheets in a clanking house. Clank, I love you, clank, not spring. Glossy grass wigging in a brightening sky, the thrill of hair standing on my limbs. To be and not to understand nothing and be content to watch light against leaf shadowed ground, to accept the ground, to go to it as a question, to open up the day, inside the day, a bubble holding air, bending the vista to it, to be inside this thing, outside in the grass place, out in the day, inside another thing. Did that siren, was that coming through loud and clear when I was reading? Good. Very short poem called Untitled Amherst Spectre, and I have to read this because I work in Amherst, Massachusetts, where Emily Dickinson resided and whose spirit is still sending us occult messages. Untitled Amherst Spectre, a sound of open ground having been taken. Now a silver wisp winking on the roof, silver imp waving from a long shaft to go. I am a leaf storm night. I have seen the long file of mule trains and metal, the cavalry. These sounds we live within speaking to you now. Sir, I was a soldier in these woods. We like to think of her as the advance guard. Another short one. Archaeophonics. I'm just visiting this voice. I'm just visiting the molecular structures that say what I am saying. I am just visiting the world at this moment, and it's on fire. It's always been on fire. I'm saying this and it's saying me. That's how it works. Seesaw-like. The archive in the mouth, and the archive is on fire. That's the story. The sun in the body, and the body in the sun. It was like this, just like this, the world that's coming toward me and the world around me. Around me are words saying this, saying fire, saying something, or all of it. Wrote this one in Cambridge. Sentences in a synapse field. For I wanted sound to dig into sound, for snow and blood, for wine and mirrors, for electrons and electricity, for debris, for damaged art, our collective fortune, future. For as long as there have been soldiers, there have been poets. For as long as poets, there has been a bridge. For I wanted to hold a room in silence, for debris flooding back into a wave. For as long as particles, a charge, for it should be incredulity, to be alive, for these things that can be told until mystery becomes elegy, for it was March going into April, for the day was speaking the day, for what you thought, for what you buried, for who you are. This is a weird one, but I like it. Release the darkness to new lichen. But I found a way to say no to the wood in my house. It kept creaking, wouldn't stop talking. I found a way to say no. I need to be standing in the warmth of the wood that the sun made. I need to find myself dissolving. Otherwise, it is all. Otherwise, I'm lost. Did I say that? I saw the frill of light today, walking on the path. Could you hear the stirring in the wood, pine needles in the branches? Was it wind or a creature? Am I here or is it over? This was the first day, the nothing day, in the nothing year. It gave me courage. It gave hints of blue, clouds electrical and dancing. It gave me rays I've never seen, shooting down, touching things. This was the first day. And one more from this book. This book being Archaeophonic. Here's one called Song. David Grundy really liked this one. Song. I want color to braid, to bleed, want song to fly, to flex, to think in lines, to work the pulp, to open up this cardinal feeling in green. The hardest part is the songbirds in their fugue state, fug state, fuck it. The world is neon in the gloaming quiet. I am willing to walk away, willing to be on fire, to blaze, to blake, to sink into the moon's aphorism in its garden of figures. The moon above my life, it's rough and real tonight, cold fusion reflecting sun. There is a quaver, a gibbous light to this equation. Puzzling rays full of dinghies and pixies, kobolds and gems, heroes, songsters, and your face. The strangeness becomes you, darling night. And I'll read just, I think, two from my new book, which is also, I think one of them are in the new section of Sky Burial. But since this references the North, which we know is the heart of England, I thought I'd read this. Out of the world in real time. The silence in this room is causing a looping effect. All I see is wood grain and air when it's raining in the true north of the poem. It gives purchase to the page. It gives courage. I want to tell you this isn't just all song. I want to say this scrap of paper has sky in it, to be lost in its yesterglow, casting shadows upon a silent H, H for hour and honor, honest and air, also ghost, ghastly, ghetto, etc. Who knew such light could come from torn paper? What comes first, flag or paper, voting or votive? There are distances, the whole archival light blooming. I recast words to say everything touched by light remembers that light. To recast light that touched marble strewn from time, laying among weeds and trash, worn from human traffic and ordinary song. In my head, a flywheel, unable to power anything other than song, and all that's left is survival. Some old piece of canvas flapping in the gale. The oak creaks and the air is keening. That green light could only be oxygen. I am witness, a copy of rain in June, a glinting vowel. Here's the shorter of the two title poems. I'll read this one for David Hurd. Now it's dark. No one gave me a greater thing than their time, but the old song worn from use is with me again. So much of it behind me now, in front of me, a slow season when a face passes into a name. Last night, the moon was lolling 9 degrees over the horizon, but I didn't know. I was in a fever dream downloading ravens into my skull, an unkindness of them This is called what it's like to sleep alone for years. It means all these years to remain untouched, wrote the poem. I use my mouth to say goodbye, fever dream, raven, skull, to say like a flower, little dust, to say what of it? The world is close today, and elegy is my tonic. I recast language in hope of recovering the red oak my neighbors felled. It lived over 100 years, glowing. Now, neither music or rhyme, just night, tin, and sky. And I'm going to close with the opening poem of this book, which is also the opening poem of Sky Burial. This book is called, did I say? Now It's Dark, Truth in Advertising in the title. Yeah, and I'll end with this. And this one happily appeared in the great Cambridge Literary Review. So thank you. Speech acts for a dying world. A field sparrow is at my window, tapping at its reflection. A tired antique god trying to communicate. It's getting to me as I set out to sing the nimbus of flora under a partly mottled sky. As I look at the end and sing, so what? Sing, live now, thinking, why not? I'm listening and receiving now, and it feeds me. I'm always hungry when the beautiful is too much to carry inside my winter, when my library is full of loss, full of wonder, as the polis is breaking and casts a shadow over all of me, thinking of it. When the shadows fall in ripples, when the medium I work in is deathless, and I'm living inside one great example of stubbornness, as my head is stove in by a glance, as the day's silver tip buds sway in union, waving to the corporate sky. When I said work and meant lyric, when I thought I was done with the poem as a vehicle to understand violence, I thought I was done with the high-toned, shitty world, done with the voice and its constituent pap. Call down the inherited phenomenal world when it's raining in the book, lost to the world in an abundance of world, like listening to a violin when the figure isn't native, but the emotion is. When everything is snow and what lies ahead is a mesmer's twirling locket. I thought I was done with the marvel of ephemeral shadow play, the great design and all that. I thought I was done with time, its theatricality, glamour, and guff. Gusting cloud, I see you, I become you in my solitary thinging here in partial light. When I said voice, I meant the whole unholy grain of it. It felt like paradise. Meaning rises and sets. Now a hunter overhead, now a bear at the pole, and the sound of names, the parade of names. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing, and a few different CLR poems. Always so nice hearing them than reading them on the page. Yeah, sentences in a synapse field as well. Didn't we print that?
Yeah.
An archival light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So at any rate, thank you so much. And it was really, yeah, it's fun to read. It's fun to read with you guys. Feels like good company.
Brilliant grouping. Now everybody's been kind enough to say they will take questions, but I haven't actually been keeping an eye on chat, sadly. So I'll just flick through, but do just wave or unmute or anything. I think there's few enough people here that we can probably just play it by ear. Eric's got a good question, I see. What do online encores look like? Hello, Eric.
Don't know what to say to that. I come up with I'll come out and play Freebird. That means nothing to any of you, but yeah. Luke, why don't you answer that question? I don't. No, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Freebird.
Mm.
I don't know. I haven't done any Zoom readings, so I don't until now. So I feel committed to the Luddist sort of ambivalence about all of it.
Mm. But I think what Eric's saying is he was very happy with the reading. He'd like more. So bless you, Eric. I mean, yeah, you guys were great. You guys have such great new work.
Is there a reason you haven't done any readings, Luke? I'm saying this in full light of having read your ambivalence towards reading in general in an absolutely brilliant section of his Glacial Decoys book.
Yeah, which begins, I hate readings. I love readings. I love readings.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, yeah, mainly because of that, because I hate and love them too much, you know. They're kind of, it was funny because right before the lockdown, there was this reading that Peter gave with Denise Riley at this little venue in Dalston, and it seemed like everybody I knew was there, and it was like a very beautiful and moving occasion, just as everybody was beginning to get a little bit terrified of what was going to happen. And throughout this period of having no readings to go to in real life, you know, in actual space, it's been nice to go back to that reading and kind of have it as I think of that Robert Duncan poem of, you know, often I'm permitted to return to a meadow, and in my meadow, it's all of my friends are there listening to Peter and Denise, you know.
That reading was truly astounding and beautiful and wonderful. And it was one of the things, reading with Denise and David's intros and you and so many people there. It was the best. And that's kind of what got me through COVID, was that, okay, I've lost all these other readings, but nothing was going to top that anyway, you know?
Until now.
Yeah, right.
Rosie's asking why don't I approve of reading prose, and I feel like, I don't know, I just say these things, you know. I mean, it's fine, obviously.
So those new poems you read, they're in the new book that's coming out?
One of them is, and and the other one's in a little book that a chapbook that Tom and Alex Marsh are going to do.
Nice.
I think.
And Hannah, how about you? You're getting there, right? With a book, with those wonderful new poems?
Yeah, slowly. Actually, some of the new poems are going to be in a chapbook that Michael Slozik and his friend run out of Milwaukee in the fall.
Nice.
But I've never sort of written in chapbooks before. It's not I don't know, a kind of form I've found myself drawn to, but I just happened to sort of be working on things that kind of arrived in these 2 chapbook size lengths. So I'm grateful chapbooks exist.
And Bowl of Fruit is in one of them.
Yep, that's the one that's coming out in the fall.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, it says they're just to big up the Poets Hardship Fund in the comments there, which it's great that we could support it tonight.
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. That was really heartening how many tickets we sold, actually, given that there's a free option and everything. I'm not quite sure what we're up to, but there will be an option in the chat, I think. We've got a tip jar that people can add more to show appreciation or to give to the Poets Hardship Fund. And we'll let you know how much we make by the end. But it's been wonderful. Yes, there's the tip jar in the chat. Did I hear throughout the kind of different ones you read, Peter, there was an awful lot of references to archive and archival.
Yeah,
Yeah, a huge variety of different contexts.
well,
There was light, there was libraries, there was different thing. And I wondered about that and its relation to poetry as an act of archiving. Yeah.
okay, well, I think that being a poet and spending my life doing this, that poetry is one of the most significant or resonant ways we have to understand the human record. People have been writing lament forever. I even said it in a poem, as long as there's been soldiers, there's been poets. And it's a long, sad, venerable tradition. And I feel like I just get to be a piece of the song, a piece of the archive, an artifact of this archive. And so I'm interested. I've also worked in archives. I love them. I love ethography. I love seeing the dead's handwriting. I think poetry, by nature is a haunted art and cuts very deep. And, but I like this notion of a fine spot unknown, because I think it's a useful metaphor that I can use to write a new book. And I feel that I'm beginning one because, it's an artifact of an unknown origin, which is really great for poetry. And weirdly, the world is an artifact of an unknown origin, the universe. So it's big enough that I can work with that. So I really like it. And I feel like, I have like another 4 other new, I don't know, it's starting. So I'm not going to question, I'm just going to do it. Yeah. And maybe I'm redundant. Maybe I just use the same things over and over again. Could be happening.
Yeah, famously, The Origin of Species isn't about any origin. We don't know the origin of the species. It's the least suitable title in the history of science. Origins are fine spots unknown, I suppose. Do you feel you're archiving at all, Luke and Hannah? Or, yeah, excavating?
Hand in notebooks, and so all of my poems are made out of bits of language that have made their way into my notebooks, and then sometimes you find yourself writing something and you need little bits to get from A to B, and I find them in my notebooks, and I have them in my drawer here. I've got my big stacks of notebooks, that I lost one once. I've been keeping my notebooks very methodically for about 12 years now, and I lost one, and I was very bereft. Because I really need them to do my work. And they stopped making the one that I liked as well. I feel very superstitious also about writing, that there are all kinds of little rituals and relations that I want to keep like secret. That they're like the special powers that have come from somewhere, like Emily Dickinson, occult messages. The crucial thing is the space between the lines is the thing that I feel very kind of fetishistic about. I should get over it. There's so much I should get over. That is one. But what about Hannah? Hannah, do you write on a screen or by hand?
I actually, I was nodding a lot when you were talking, because I've recently, or not recently, the last couple of years, I really can only write by hand. And then the poems kind of get assembled out of the handwritten stuff. But I've also, so I started a 9-to-5 job about, now I'm, at home with it, but a year and a half ago. And I found that really fucked with my writing time. So I started getting up really early in the mornings. And that has become this really wonderful, I'm not programmatic about it. I don't do it every single day, but I would say, most days I get up at 4. or 5 and write for an hour and then go back to bed. And the wonderful thing about that is that I forget what I've written. And so when I go back to reread, it's like this, you know, like gift of, of language that I don't feel responsible for, but is like, is there and has arrived from somewhere. So that, yeah, I use like really corporate moleskins to write in, but similarly, if the size changes, like I got a smaller one last year, I think, and it just was so wrong. And so I tore out the pages I had written and taped them into my regular sized one. So yeah, totally kind of the fetish of the writing object is important increasingly to me as well.
Well, my handwriting has gotten so bad that if I don't type it up really quickly, I have no idea what I've written. You know, it's really atrophied because of the computer. But as far as archives, I mean, I guess what I've been interested in, Lydia, is, you know, an archive of the invisible world. And what do I mean by that? I've been really thinking about the invisible world in lockdown, and it's two things. The invisible world is all around us. It's what we see every day and otherwise goes unrecognized, undocumented. And that's the invisible world. And in poems, they're given finally their proper estate. They come into view and we put them in relation. And the other invisible world is the one, of course, we carry inside us. And the idea of the other world, or the world of the dead, or the afterlife, or any of these kind of things, it's not over there like some Halloween spooky thing. It's actually right in here. And we all carry the underworld inside us. That's where it lives. It's invisible. And we give it voice. And all the people we've known who have gone before us and live within us, we carry them. And that relationship becomes far more intimate once they cross from this world and become gone. And the relationship becomes so much deeper, and it filters and fibers the imagination. And so the affiliated voices that occur within a poem come from that space too, and that interrelationship. So that's another way in which the invisible world is disclosed. So I think I'm interested in archiving the invisible world. That makes, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, beautiful. In a much less invisible and beautiful way, we're selling our archive, and that's been a lot of it's just fascinating how much we accreted in 12 years. We got just so much email, paper, everything, and that's been a really odd process in a way.
Where's it going?
The Cambridge University Library, appropriately enough.
That's so great.
Yeah, it's
congratulations.
It's tricky, but they're using us as a test case, which is wonderful, about how to take a digital archive of this nature, which is often very personal, and we're dealing with emails emails to poets. They can go.
It's about time they got hip and started actually collect recent contemporary or recent dead authors, that the archive is beginning to happen, because so much of English writing, Irish writing, is in American archives. Beckett, Yeats, Joyce. I mean, it's insane. And so yeah, I think it's great that England's finally getting hip and keeping its papers. They just took Jeremy Prynne's all of his papers.
Who did? Sorry.
The Cambridge Library took all of Jeremy Prynne's papers recently, and that was kind of like a watershed moment for them. I'd like to know where Tom Rayworth's papers are going to go. Luke, you got any ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to Notre Dame.
See,
so
this
they're
is
going,
what I'm saying. Yeah,
going to the United States, but they'll be looked after.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
Well, it's fitting for Tom too, who spent
such a lot of time there.
So
He wasn't so keen on Cambridge. I think the only thing for it is to write through it, and I mean, as you described communication there, I think of how much kind of untruth and lies have been communicated over the last 18 months or 2 years, or our whole epoch of corruption and falsity in politics. And I think that one of the things that poetry might sometimes do is be able to counter that in some ways, or kind of you know, chew it up and spit it back out again. And I think that the question of the transition out of a kind of isolation, and where you can really understand the barrier of communication. Like I would wake up and have the radio in the corner, sort of as a menacing reminder of everything. And yeah, I think that you know, things open up again, and the terms of communication changes with the changes in our social relations to one another. And you know, you have these great large protests the last couple of weeks for the Palestinian solidarity demonstration in London, where suddenly I was on the tube for the first time in a year with thousands and thousands of people chanting "Free Palestine," and that seemed like a very direct type of communication to come back into, that's just out, you know, right outside the door. So I don't feel nervous about that. I think that that's just something that happens, and that poetry, when you say you have to be vulnerable to it, you have to be ready for it, you have to be prepared for it, to let things in, and to take part in them, you know. And do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? And not to be kind of to second guess yourself too much, but to trust your the preparations you've made, right? To write yourself into these problems. That's me done.
Hannah, do you have something to add to that?
I think that was lovely, and very true. I mean, you know, I think this sort of the ways in which folks have found to be together in the pandemic, whether, you know, through protest or through Zoom readings, walks, you know, like I think the sort of I take heart in the fact that like moments of connection and solidarity were kind of sought out and found despite everything that has happened in the last 18 months. And so poetry's role in that, you know, I mean, there are, you know, like much more like sort of politically engaged poets than I am, for sure. Poetry for me is really about, I mean, it is about vulnerability. It's about finding kind of intimate speech, and a way to say things that I almost can't say, or I almost can't know that I want to say. And I think, you know, as we sort of move back into, you know, whatever, or move forward into whatever the world is going to look like, that poetry's ability to kind of allow me personally, or, you know, readers, other writers, to sort of test utterance out is something like that has always been true for me, and I think will just continue to be true. So I don't know, maybe a bad answer.
I don't think I have an answer. I just don't know, Eric. I mean, the pandemic, or whatever we want to call it, as horrible as it's been and horrible as it is, and the massive amount of life lost, is brutal. But the thing that's been loudest to me has just been the responses and the political reality in which we live in, and just how completely psychotic the American government is. And so that's been the louder voice to me than the pandemic has been the news. And that's maybe wrong, but I'm not at all, you know, the life lost, I mourn, but all the horrors and lack of human care that government and politics provide us, and commercial governing, that's just getting louder and louder. So that's what's kind of occupied my mind. And then the connections and the phone calls and the friends and the all of that's been really lovely. But I'm glad that the world's opening up, and or at least here, it's probably opening up 2 months or 3 months too soon. But it's been nice to go to the movies. It's been nice to see people and actually hug someone, you know, and it's like so important, you know, so that's been nice. But I don't know if I can speak to it, Eric. And I don't write topical poems. I write how I write. And if the political touches my work, it's more of a psycho political reality. It's how the voice is bent and aware of the terms in which it uses a language that has an army and a navy and all sorts of other horrible things. So that's somehow how the political comes into my work. It's more the psycho political reality and how it imbues all language, because it's already being used in such despicable ends in a public way, I guess. Don't know.
We have a comment from Daphne Roberts as well that echoes one thing you just said about how the pandemic has allowed us to do all sorts of things that we might not have been able to do across continents and time zones and all sorts of things. And I totally feel like that as well. I'll actually miss online events, however much they're not replacing real ones. I'll miss some of the opportunities that I've had this past year.
It's like, for me, it's like building something, you know, less so than revising it. It's like piecing it together, and for me, I think writing is closest to collage, and one of the ways in which things fit together and you find out whether or not they fit together is how it sounds, and so those kind of acoustic shapes that the poem takes or is determined by sometimes is yeah, it's like the glue for the holding the bits of language together, if that makes sense. So not like small revisions, but more like a slower process of accumulation and arrangement is how I do it.